Hi, my name is Autif Kamal, and this is episode 34 of Be Logical. In this episode, I will think and talk about whether the 3D printing industry will surpass and phase out the mass manufacturing industry. Now, when I say mass manufacturing, I'm referring to, well, of course, like factories and assembly lines, whether with humans or machines, and the products have a very broad range. It could be toys, tools, vehicles such as cars, airplanes, ships. Could be like clothing, and the list goes on. Okay. Now, most of the information that I will present to you, I'm getting from Martha Mendoza, who writes for the Associated Press, and the name of her article is "3D Printing Goes from Sci-Fi Fantasy to Reality." Now, to consider whether the 3D printing industry will surpass and phase out the mass manufacturing industry, we need to know the current state of the 3D printing industry, its trajectory, as well as the current state and trajectory of the mass manufacturing industry. To get an idea about that, I'm going to talk about what the present sales have been for each, the 3D printing industry and the mass manufacturing industry. Okay. Before I do that, I should talk about what exactly a 3D printer is and what it does. Now, a 3D printer, it produces 3D objects, and for that reason, it seems kind of inappropriate to me to call it a printer, just because when I guess my current conception of a printer is one that you find in an office that prints out documents on paper, not like actual 3D physical objects. But that's what a 3D printer will do, and it'll sustain the functions of the objects that it produces. So a screwdriver printed from a 3D printer can still be used like screwdrivers that are not from a 3D printer. A toy car that's produced from a 3D printer could still be used like a toy car bought from Toys R Us or some other store. Okay. Now, examples of things that have been made from 3D printers recently are like Invisalign, like transparent braces, chocolate molds, a human-shaped ear using collagen, iPad stands, guitars, jewelry, guns, and there are probably many more items beyond that. Now, the current price range of 3D printers goes anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000, and with that price range, you also get a range of different sizes as well. Okay. Now, this is a statement made by Robert Devaney, a business professor of Dartmouth College. He claims that the 3D printing industry will make the mass manufacturing industry basically cease to exist. This is exactly what he says. He says, "We're on the verge of the next industrial revolution. No doubt about it. In 25 years, entire industries are going to disappear. Countries relying on mass manufacturing are going to find themselves with no revenues or jobs." Okay? Is it true that the 3D printing industry will cause the mass manufacturing industry to cease to exist? That's a claim that we're going to consider right now. So first, let's look at the 3D printing industry. Presently, its sales are roughly at about 1.7 billion, and in 2015, about 2 years from now, it's expected to do a little more than double, up to 3.7 billion. And this information I got from the acronym of the organization, of the market research organization, is IBIS, I-B-I-S. Okay. Now, I also looked up information on the sales of the mass manufacturing industry. Now, presently, well, when I say presently, I mean 2010. Those are the latest numbers that I could obtain. Their sales were at 5.7 trillion. So, yeah, they're many times ahead of the 3D printing industry, but also you have to keep in mind that the 3D printing industry is still relatively young. I would guess like a few years young, but that's something I would have to double check. Whereas the manufacturing industry has been around for a really long time. And again, that's something either you or I, should double check to see exactly how long they've been around. And I'm getting this information regarding the manufacturing industry sales from the United States Census Bureau. The name of the article was titled Manufacturers. Okay. Now, I want to go into what I think are some obvious advantages of 3D printers over the mass manufacturing industry. And I could summarize it in one word, which is immediacy. Now, to give you some examples, let's say you have like a unit of troops. They're out of bullets, they're in the middle of a fight. It's kind of dangerous to have a helicopter come by and drop off ammunition if they need it. But if they had a 3D printer in their barracks or wherever they are at the time, then they could print out the bullets on the spot. Okay, so that saves them a lot of trouble. Some more commonplace examples would be, let's say you are an auto mechanic or you are a plane mechanic. You need some specific parts. You could wait anywhere from days to weeks to months to receive those specific parts, or you could use a 3D printer you have on site to print it out, so you get it right away. Another commonplace example is this. Let's say you're a dishwasher repairman. You need a specific part again. You go to the back of your truck, assuming you have an energy source for your 3D printer, and you print it out from there. Okay, so those are some examples of the immediacy that would come from the 3D printers. But I do think there are a couple disadvantages. So first off, presently the cost of 3D printing plastics are pretty expensive. They're from $35 to $45 per kilogram presently. That doesn't give much incentive to Walmart to use them, since they pay 14 to 17 cents per hour to their workers in Bangladesh. And I'm getting this information from, the name of the website was Deloitte. Name of the article is 3D printing is here, but the factory in every home isn't here yet. Okay, so that's one disadvantage, is the price of the materials. But then to that, my response is that, and my very safe guess is that the price for 3D printers will go down. And I'll give you an analogy for that. Now, the first laptop was called the Osborne 1. It came out in 1981, and the price for it was, when it first came out, was $1,795. And I'm getting this information from about.com. The name of the article is History of Laptop Computers. Okay, now let's fast forward to present day. The cheapest laptop is the NPX 9000 for $130. I tried to look for it online, but I couldn't find it. The next cheapest laptop that I could find to actually purchase was Google's Acer C7 Chromebook, which is for $199. So after basically like 35 to 40 years, the price for laptops have dropped by like 10 times the amount. Okay, that's a bit longer than Robert Devaney's projection of 25 years, but you never know. It could be different than this particular scenario, or this particular example. Now, another disadvantage with 3D printers is specifically for businesses. It's not really necessarily a problem for individuals or consumers, is that files even now can be downloaded online. You could download shows, music, movies, programs for free if you know where to look. And I imagine that, I don't know how the 3D printer works, but my guess would be that you could find the specs for a particular product online, then have your 3D printer read those specs, and because you have those specs, you can now produce the product. And that means that these individuals or would-be consumers will not purchase from the businesses. So actually then they're not consumers. So then you have businesses like losing out. And that's what I think is a major disadvantage for businesses with 3D printers. Now going back to 3D printers and how I'm kind of inclined to think that eventually, like one day in the future, they will overcome the mass manufacturing industry. And one really big reason why is because I think they're going to, like right now, they're going to vary in sizes. Um, and if they'll vary in sizes, like imagine what would happen if they could make it the size of a car. So now they could produce cars in a 3D printer. If they could make it the size of a car, then they could make it also the size of an airplane, produce planes from the 3D printer, produce ships, and so on. If they could do all of that when they vary their sizes, then they could offer some like major competition to the mass manufacturing industry, and that'd be a big indicator that they could actually make the mass manufacturing industry cease to exist. Okay, and that is it for this episode of Be Logical, and thank you for watching and or listening.